Hi, this is Victoria Vox, and my latest album is Nirvana in REM. And you are listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Modernism Week in Palm Springs, California. Every February, for a week that actually lasts 11 days, they have an architecture and design festival. And U.S. Modernist Radio is there for all 11 days of the week, interviewing nearly all of Modernism Week's keynote speakers, plus special guests. It all happens at the U.S. Modernist compound. That would be poolside at the hip Hotel Skylark. I'm Tom Guild. This year at Modernism Week, I finally got to meet Nelda Lensk, the woman who's in one of Palm Springs' most famous photos, Poolside Gossip. She still looks fabulous, and man, she can also still gossip about everybody else in that picture. Like 50 years later, she was a real treat. And now, the guy who would have fit right into that photo, whose Palm Springs blazer can only be viewed with special protective glasses, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thank you, Tom. Yes, some of my blazers do need special radioactive protection for the general public because they are quite bright and festive. That's what you do when you go to some of these parties in Palm Springs. When modern-day Dorothys kick their ruby slippers together, they don't go to Kansas. They land next to Frank Sinatra's pool in Palm Springs, which is a great place to go dress up. This is a time where if you like to dress up to go to a party, you can do this every night for pretty much all 11 days. Another thing I really love about going to Palm Springs and California in general is I can make my pilgrimage to the famous In-N-Out Burger. It's on the edge of town. These burgers are fantastic, and you have to get there pretty much when they open, which is at 10 a.m., or there's going to be a line of 20, 30 people or longer going into the night at midnight. Cars will wrap themselves around the building 20 deep for people to get a hold of these burgers. So it really is a must-see, stop in and eat place when you go to Palm Springs. If you want to go with me and Tom to Modernism Week 2023 and stay with us at the U.S. Modernist compound, email me at george@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs, and by modernist realtor Angela Roll. In a story that we are largely making up, modernist realtor Angela Roll worked her way through college, dancing like no one's watching to Mambo No. 5 and brilliantly house-flipping Neutra, sometimes simultaneously. At 22, following a celebrity-filled party at a famous hillside L.A. modernist house involving diving off the roof into the pool, absolute Le Mans, and a new use for WD-40, Angela was recruited to the architecture school, where after years of sleep-deprived design studios, she's now a modernist real estate agent with specialized training, advising buyers and sellers on everything from appropriate renovation to saving a completely doomed mid-century house from destruction. That last one is true. Reach her at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL or 919-995-0550.
If you're just starting out as a fan of modernism, you go to a documentary or you buy a book. At level 2, you find a great deal on a modernist table or chair for your home. Next, you plan a trip somewhere like LA. Your friends ask, what are you going to do? Go to Hollywood? Look for celebrities? And you say, no, I'm going to drive around looking at modernist houses. And your friends drift off, shaking their heads. Now at, say, level 17, after much planning, you decide to buy a modernist house and the real adventure begins. Today, we talk with 3 California modernist homeowners and one very lucky house guest. First up, Ronnie Sassoon is an art historian, designer, and collector of 1960s and 70s art. After a career in fashion design and advertising, she worked closely with her late husband, Vidal Sassoon, in product development, fragrance, and marketing of the Vidal Sassoon brand worldwide. She lives in the second of 2 Richard Neutra homes, for which she personally directed a restoration. Ronnie also owns a Breuer house in Connecticut. Her new book is a great how-to for furnishing a modernist house. Selection, Art, Architecture, and Design from the collection of Ronnie Sassoon. Here's George's conversation with Ronnie Sassoon.
Ronnie, before we get going, let's talk about a tragic death lately. The Garrell house by Breuer.
Yes.
We're all mourning that.
Yes, we are. We were gutted by that news. He promised. Docomomo got in touch with James and me some time ago and said, yes, it's been sold. We're nervous. He's a developer. But he said he loved the house. He's keeping it and not to worry. And then he tore it down in the middle of the night a few weeks ago in order to build a tennis court.
Really?
Yes.
So did he buy the house next door or something, too? Is that how it worked?
I'm not sure. I heard that he did, but I'm not absolutely sure.
And was this one of those where you can walk down to the city or county planning office and get a over-the-counter demolition permit quickly in your jurisdiction?
I'm assuming if you're a developer, you can do just about anything you want.
Okay. And this was important because it was really one of Breuer's star houses. It was one of the binuclear houses, I believe. So it has 2 sections.
All of his houses were binuclear, and it was really out of consideration for men who had returned from the war and had shell shock and didn't want to hear, screaming children. So, as some people say, it was Breuer's design to keep the children as far away as possible.
From the adults.
Yes.
So what? They would put the children in one side and the G.I. Joe in the other one?
Essentially, the main living areas were on one side.
Primary area was on one side, and children and nanny, with or without, on the other side. And then the living quarters were in the middle, and usually open space living quarters.
Okay.
Kitchen, living room, dining room, all in the middle where everyone congregated. But in the case of our Breuer house in Connecticut, Rufus Stillman had come back with only one leg. His left leg was missing. And so he hopped around the house and, he kind of liked to stay in the primary side of the house. In fact, he had a secret window, which you will see in my book. There's a photograph of James removing the wooden plug in front of the window so that you didn't get the sun in your eyes when you were lying in bed. He would hop over, remove the plug from the window, and the window was situated perfectly. A fabulous little Breuer window, and he could see the person standing in front of the door and then decide if it was worth hopping to the front door to answer it.
This is before video systems.
Yes.
Exactly.
It
That
was
his
the early
video
ring system, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right. Now, you've been involved with fashion and design and beauty for a long time. When did you start getting involved with architecture and get your first modernist house?
Well, I think it goes back to when I was in high school, and one of my closest friends' father, he was an architect, and he had gone to Harvard and studied under Walter Gropius. And I just thought that house was it. I thought it was everything. I was used to the Midwest. I was used to early colonial houses, and they didn't interest me at all. And then I saw this house, and I decided then, this is how I want to live.
And how long was it until you actually got in one?
When I met Vidal, he said, I have to have a modernist house. I've been with women that couldn't tolerate modernism, and I said, well, you're with the right girl. This is what I want. And you couldn't even say to a realtor.
That should be a new personal service,
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Match.com for modernism.
Exactly. And you couldn't even say to a real estate agent, you couldn't say, I want, a mid-century modernist house. It wasn't a term that the masses were familiar with. And so I saw a lot of frogs, and then she showed me this fabulous Hal Levitt house in Beverly Hills, and it was just perfection.
And what year was this about?
This was about 1989.
Okay.
Maybe closer to 1990. And I saw that house. I showed it to Vidal, and he was like, this is perfect. It was a classic U-shaped Bauhaus house. And Hal Levitt was, he was basically known for Hollywood Regency. So he gave it a Hollywood Regency twist.
Kind of flair.
But it was beautiful, white, gray onyx floors. The mine is now extinct, but the floors were exceptional. All steel and glass, more glass than you would legally be allowed to use. And high ceilings. The ceilings were almost 12 feet high. They were incredible.
That's astonishing.
And there was a bridge that connected the private quarters to the public quarters, and it was all glass. And you could actually pull the glass doors into pockets on the side and open that bridge up so the house was, technically open to the air.
Did someone own the house before that? Did you know who the previous owners were?
Well, I think it was a couple from Texas. I can't remember, but they didn't own it very long. But prior to that, famously, the Shah of Iran's sister lived in the house. And during the coup, I was told that there were Persians carrying machetes, literally machetes, up the hill through Beverly Hills, and they were going to come after her.
Okay, so it was either going to be guards or attackers.
Yeah.
And there wasn't somebody filming a scene.
No. This was real, and I have heard from very, good sources that this is exactly what happened. And of course, they were stopped. She was a really eccentric woman. I never met her, but she had covered almost every surface of the house, cladded it in marble. And she had 5 Shih Tzus, like Peggy Guggenheim, and she had an in-house veterinarian to take care of them. Yes.
Yeah. I need one of those.
Right? Yeah, everybody needs one. And so when Vidal and I first moved in, we kept the same pool man who'd been taking care of the pool for years. And we had a Shih Tzu. And the pool man arrives, and he turns and looks at my housekeeper and said, "Oh my God, are those dogs still here?"
Yeah, they actually own the house. Everybody else just renting from them.
Well, if you've ever had a dog, they do own the house.
They do
for
own
sure.
you, right? So that was your gateway drug, the Levitt House. Mm-hmm. And then what happened after that?
We lived in the Levitt House for, I think it was like almost 17 years, something like that. Anyway, the Singleton house came on the market, and it was in really sad shape, and it desperately needed saving. And it had such a beautiful 7 acres of just gorgeous property up on Mulholland with a fabulous view.
Mm-hmm. Did you say 7 acres?
Yeah.
That's a big piece of land.
That's a big piece of land. Developer's heaven. That could have been a whole subdivision.
Yeah, you're right.
For the same developer that destroyed the Geller.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a gorgeous piece of property, wild animals. I mean, I would drive down the driveway and it was like, going on safari. Sometimes there was a mountain lion killing a rattlesnake for lunch, and I just had to stop the car and sit and wait to see who won.
That was craft services, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Presumably the mountain lion one?
Yeah, so we decided that I wanted the project. So originally it was a project, and I was going to save it. The day after we bought the house, the roof had been, the flat roof had been a swimming pool for years because no one took care of it. So there was
not an intentional swimming pool.
Okay,
No.
Just
it
full
was,
of water.
A de facto.
Yeah, what James and I refer to as death water. Stagnant, hideous water. And the day after we bought it, the roof caved in completely.
It was
the dining
waiting
room.
for you.
It was. Yeah, I thought, that's a great piece of luck. So anyway, I did the project, and like Neutra, I knew that Neutra used his client as the first and foremost material when he was building a house. He was not just building a house, he was building a home. And that comes from being so close to the Freuds, when he was back in Vienna. And so he would interview people extensively and sometimes move in with them.
Right, sure.
To figure out exactly how they lived. And he knew that they would lie, or that one of the couple was stronger than the other and would, say what they wanted, but it was really what he or she wanted. And then he would interview them separately to find out what both
Oh,
of them
that's like what
wanted
cops
individually.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With murder suspects.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was an interrogation, I think. And he would actually move in with them sometimes if he didn't think they were telling the truth. Like, do you watch much TV? They would say, oh, no.
Oh, no.
And then he would move in and find out that that's what they love to do every night is watch TV.
Watching the Monkees, 1965.
When I was renovating the house, I used Vidal as my client. So I did the house for him. What might he want? What might he need? And I think I did it so well that as soon as I finished it, he walked in and said, "This is my house. We're moving here." And I
Wow.
said, "Okay." And right after that, right after we moved up to this fabulous, peaceful, amazing house, Vidal was diagnosed with leukemia.
Wow.
And so he had this incredible property with the animals that he just absolutely loved. And he had
got
that.
to enjoy that.
Yes, and he passed in peace. And
And when was that?
that was almost 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did he pass at home?
he did. He did, with me. And the dogs.
And the dogs?
And the dogs. We were all in bed with him.
What a gift.
Yeah.
It was lovely. I mean, I had never had that experience. And I kind of thought to myself, okay, I can do this. Yeah, this is going to be okay.
And you still have the house?
No,
No.
I asked him posthumously. I said, okay, you did this to me. You put me in this position. I'm alone in this huge house on this big piece of property. And at first, I wanted to be in his energy. I didn't want to get rid of the house because I was afraid if I even left the house, I would leave his energy.
Right.
And then after a while, I really did want to leave it because he had died there and I didn't want to be reminded of that. So I said to him, I said, you put me in this position. Now you need to find me another Neutra house, much smaller, turnkey, because I had planned to live part of the time in our apartment in London.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, so you need to find me another Neutra. And I said, as long as I'm asking, I want no property. I want 3 bedrooms. I want a panoramic view, a swimming pool. And I just gave him the list. And the very next morning, I got a phone call from a friend who had just had dinner with the owner of the house. And he said, he's putting the house on the market. I had seen the house, and I said, I don't think so. And this friend of mine was he was a rock and roller and a part-time real estate agent.
Yeah.
And I said, let's go over today. And I bought it the next day.
Or the next day?
Mm-hmm.
And which house was that of Neutra's?
It's called the Levitt House. It's not very well known. It's
Okay.
Levit,
IT.
not to be confused with
Hal Levitt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And there isn't much known about it. Not too many photographs.
But you have them in your book.
Well, I do now.
Yes.
Oh, you have a book.
But when I bought it,
Right.
there was really not much, as far as reference was concerned.
Okay. So you're really a serial modernist now,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yes, I'm afraid so.
There's no cure.
No, there's no going back.
And so was the Breuer house you owned the next one, or was there one in between?
Well, I met James, and we found that when we went to Europe, we wanted to spend a lot more time in France and Italy than we did in England.
Okay.
And luckily, I sold my flat in London just before Brexit. That was fortuitous. And we had found this amazing loft in New York that was formerly owned by Jack Seglick and Joel Dean. And Joel passed away, and then Jack had it with his new partner, and he was selling it. And it was my dream loft. I had seen it in 1971 in the New York Times. It was the first loft in New York that was just barely legal at that point. But it was the first...
Barely legal, why?
Well, barely legal because these were lofts, they were warehouses.
They were still industrial spaces.
Exactly. They were warehouses
like,
from the turn of the century.
Okay.
And they hadn't been modernized, and a lot of artists were just squatting.
So was it in the Times because of that as a new trend?
No, it was in the Times because Jack Seglick is an amazing designer, and he did incredible things with this loft and he had no money at the time. So he covered mattresses in artist canvas and piled them up to make sofas. I mean, he made it look extraordinary. He was such a talented artist and designer. And he's still around, and he became a friend after we bought the loft. But,
so, yeah, in 1971, you saw this, said, I must have this.
Well, I mean, I was a kid in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I thought, if ever I had the opportunity, this is exactly what I would want.
You're good at manifesting.
Yeah.
I am. It's my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Note to self. Send your request to Ronnie Sassoon.
Yeah, James already knows that.
So how about the Breuer house? Where does that come in? When did you get that?
So James and I, we sold the apartment in London, and we bought the loft in New York, and then, we were New Yorkers. And at first we thought, why would anybody leave New York to go to the country on the weekend? Because we were such city people.
Yeah.
And we thought we'd love to go to our favorite, newsstand and buy our bagels. And, Sundays were just...
Walk around.
Yeah, amazing in New York. And then, as all New Yorkers do, we started looking for a place in the country. And another manifestation, I had seen this incredible Breuer house in World of Interiors. I think it was like in 2007. And I thought, well, forget it, because that will never be available in my lifetime. Whoever has this house would never give it up. Mm-hmm. We have a friend who spends all of his time looking at modernism. That's what he does. In all of his free time.
That's the guy.
He knows where everything lives. And it was midnight one night in December, because it was snowing. And James had fallen asleep, and I get a text message. And of course, you're, getting ready to fall asleep, and then you get a text message, so you have to look. And my friend George had sent me this house and said, I saw this Breuer house, and I thought of you. And I said, George, this is the house. So I woke up really early the next morning, and I waited for James to wake up, and I said, we have to rent a car, because we didn't even have a car. We lived in New York. We have to rent a car, and we have to go up to this place called Litchfield right away. And I had never been in Litchfield. I knew nothing about it. And so I called, and the real estate agent picked up the phone, and he said, that was fast. He didn't even say hello. He had just put the house on the market 5 minutes prior to that.
Yeah.
Because my friend had seen the photographs in Curbed,
okay.
saying it was coming on the market.
Yeah.
So anyway, we drove up in 3 feet of snow. And I said to James, it could be disappointing, but I have to see it. And sometimes these houses are chopped up little dark spaces.
Yeah.
And I like sun, and I like open plan. And we walked in, and here's this fabulous binuclear house with, a loft-like living area, albeit small, but, kitchen, dining, living area, all in one room, and a courtyard. And we just walked away, and we said, oh, my God, this is the perfect house.
And that was history right there.
And that was history right there.
Now, if you've been paying attention in school here on U.S. Modernist Radio, you'll remember that we had James Crump on the show last year.
I do recall that.
Talking about the documentary that he made on Breuer, including this house and many other houses that Breuer had made. He's sitting here quietly. He's not going to say anything, but that film is one that everyone should really see if you're a fan of Breuer, because it explores not only the architecture of this brilliant man, but also the interesting friends that he had and the expansion of this influence across the country. We just recently had on the show the guy who is restoring the Pirelli building in New Haven, which is going to become a hotel. And all of these Breuer things across the country are finally getting the kind of attention that they deserve. One of the things that I liked about your book, I got to see it, was just the way that you curated these spaces was just so matching to the architecture and the light and the color, which is no surprise given your background. They're beautiful.
Thank you. It was interesting because we bought the Breuer house, and my possessions are my possessions. So, I'm not a decorator. So I had all this furniture from a Karl Strauss house that I had sold in Cincinnati. And it was waiting for a new home. And I thought, okay, well, I collect Italian art and Italian furniture. And I thought, it's going to look really good in this house. And it looked perfect in the last house. But then you move it into a Breuer house that has wax brick floors and stucco walls and incredible vernacular stone all through the house. And all of a sudden, you're not even in America anymore. All of a sudden, you actually are in Italy.
Yeah.
And so the house has just an incredible Italian vibe to it now because of its contents and because it was his most Mediterranean house.
Are there anything still left to do in the house? Any projects uncompleted?
No.
No?
Not really. Barbara Dente and Donna Cristina had owned the house when I saw it in World of Interiors, and they did a huge renovation. So it was really the first house that I didn't have to save. I had to do certain things, but nothing really major.
That's fortunate.
It was really
wonderful. The roof
wonderful.
didn't fall in when
And the roof didn't. Well,
Yeah.
we had to replace the roof, but we replaced it before it fell in.
That's good. Anything you have your eye on now for the future?
A house in Cincinnati where I grew up that I had always been obsessed with. Again, manifestation. She was a famous art collector in Cincinnati. Her name was Alice Weston. And she passed away recently. And the bank and the family, the estate, put it up for auction. And this was during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a COVID decision. I bought the house. All my friends from Cincinnati were calling me and saying, are we ever going to see you again? Because this was in the beginning, and we didn't know,
Right.
what living in a pandemic world was going to be like. And I got all nostalgic and excited because this house was, I don't know, I think it's twice the size of our little Breuer or our little Neutra, where I've had to put rolling racks up just for
Right.
my clothes and, no storage at all, as you know. And at first, James was excited about it, and then he said, Ronnie, we've been trying our entire lives to get out of the Midwest, because James is from Indiana, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. And he said, are you sure you want to do this? And I said, well, yes, it's a spectacular house, and we had just sold the loft in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay.
It's a little bit like, the New Yorkers that wonder why people want to have a country house. And next thing you know, they're out driving, looking around.
Yeah,
and they say, we'll never go back to the Midwest.
Exactly. And now I've gone totally country.
Yeah.
So,
And who designed this house?
Karl Strauss.
Karl Strauss, okay.
Yes, and Ray Rausch.
Okay.
And Karl Strauss was kind of the Neutra of the Midwest, and he did some absolutely incredible houses in Cincinnati.
This is sounding familiar. Was there a fellow named Aji Tashiro associated with this house? He would have been the associate architect and landscape architect for the firm?
I don't know that answer, George.
Okay. He was a Japanese-American architect that worked extensively in Cincinnati Modern before he moved to North Carolina.
He probably worked with Karl Strauss and Ray, yes.
Yeah, I'll look it up on my...
And that could be my next book. I mean, I don't think, there has never been a monograph done on Karl and Ray, and there should be.
Yeah. Well, we're so excited to finally meet you here. Thank you so much for stopping by. I want people to get your book, Selection, Art, Architecture, and Design from the collection of Ronnie Sassoon.
Thank you.
In fine bookstores everywhere.
Thank you for that. And thank you for having me here.
Oh, yeah.
We were just talking with Ronnie Sassoon. Cord Struckmann and partner Alfonso Cordon have purchased, preserved, and made accessible to fans the 1962 Case Study House No. 26 in San Rafael, California, designed by Beverly Thorne. According to Wikipedia, case study houses were experiments in American residential architecture, sponsored by Arts and Architecture magazine in the post-war years. They commissioned major architects including Richard Neutra, Raphael Soriano, Craig Elwood, Charles and Ray Eames, Pierre Koenig, Eero Saarinen, A. Quincy Jones, Ed Killingsworth, and Ralph Rapson, among others, to design and build inexpensive and efficient model homes for returning World War II soldiers. Many of the houses were photographed by Julius Schulman and featured in Arts and Architecture's issues. You can in fact see a 2002 panel discussion with Schulman and the last living case study house architects at usmodernist.org/resources. Here's Case Study House No. 26 owners Cord Struckmann and Alfonso Cordon talking poolside with George.
Hi, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you very much for having us, George.
We're very big fans and excited to be here today.
Is this your first podcast?
Yes, it is indeed.
Yes?
It
For
is
you
our
too?
first podcast.
Hopefully the first of many, because you have such an exciting story to talk about.
Thanks.
I want to start off with this idea that when you own a case study house like you do, you don't really own it. The house kind of owns you. Is that right?
So we always joke about it, and yeah, you are right. I think that one of the things that we always say is that we are very fortunate and lucky to be owners of Case Study House 26. So we consider more ourselves stewards of the house and taking care for future generations of architects and designers who appreciate this type of architecture.
Cord, tell us about the architect, Beverly David Thorne.
Yeah, Beverly David Thorne was the architect of this case study house. It was the only case study house he designed, and he was the last surviving case study house architect. So he only died in 2017, some years after we bought the house, but we didn't have a chance to meet him in person because he was living in Hawaii at that time. But he has been building more than 150 houses in California since the 1950s, and his kind of specialty was to build in difficult sites and building with steel. And this is what you see in our case study house. All the structural frame is in steel, so all the walls that you see are not load-bearing, and it's an amazing house. You see the steel expressed. It's not hidden behind any kind of chipboard, so it's a very expressive structure.
So what does a difficult site mean exactly?
It is very hilly, and he always builds on...
Like a cliff hilly, or...?
I think we have like 60 feet of elevation change between the front and the back. So it is a large lot, so it's almost 1 acre. So you have some space to do it, but definitely we have kind of a highly sloped area.
And Thorne specializes in these type of hills. There's an interview of him when the Case Study House book was published by Taschen, where he says that the harder the lot, the more challenging the project is, that the better the outcome is, which I think is the case for this one.
Have you been able to connect with other Thorne homeowners?
Yes, we were able, because I think we have to thank US Modernist website, because when we bought the house or visited the house for the first time in 2015, we had not heard the name Thorne before, and it was even our first case study house that we visited. And in order to find more about him, there was no, and there is still no book on Beverly Thorne. And your website was one of the only resources where you featured his work in your Modern Master's library.
Yes.
And this was an extremely helpful and kind of assuring source in these few days where we had to make up our mind if we would like to proceed with that house, to really see what other houses he built. And I think it was an extremely, and it's still a very extremely important resource, the website that you maintain. And since then we met some other people and visited some other houses. He still is not so known, so some people don't even know that they have a Thorne house.
Really?
So we help them to tell them kind of what kind of interesting house they
don't know
have.
who the architect was of their house.
But that's also a little bit by intention. We understand that Thorne, when he built one of his first houses that became famous, the Dave Brubeck house in Oakland, that house was featured in an interview on the Ed Sullivan Show. And people started calling to find out more about the architect and the house. And he actually, that's when he changed his name from David Thorne to Beverly Thorne. And at the same time, I understand that he even delisted himself from the phone book because he was thinking that then they would perceive him as a celebrity architect, and then he would lose interest of the people that really wanted to build normal houses.
To serve. The house was fantastically promoted through the Ed Sullivan Show that he did for the Brubecks. We had on Darius Brubeck, I don't know if you heard that or not, who talked about his years in that house. And the other house that Thorne designed for the Brubecks in the East later on when they had moved. And that was also spectacular.
Yeah, we have seen picture of this house when it was for sale. Unfortunately, we are not living on the East Coast. Otherwise, we would have for sure visited it. Not because we try to visit as many houses as we can to learn more about him. Mm-hmm. And people don't, even if they don't know who built them, they seem to hang on to them. So they own them for many, many years. And the interest in Thorne has been more recent, so the last 5 years. So therefore, many people know they have a very special house, but don't know all the background behind them.
So who was this house built for originally?
It was built as a spec house. Like all of these or most case study houses, they were built without a specific client in mind, because they were kind of these experimental, these showcase houses. And it was built by 20th Century Home that then partnered with different companies, because we had like two houses next to each other, one sponsored by the Douglas plywood industry.
Sure.
This was not a case study house. And then one with Bethlehem Steel for the case study house. And it was just completed. They had a couple of open houses exactly 60 years ago. And then it was for sale. And it was not an easy house to sell because it was just way too futuristic.
Yes.
It was not for everyone's taste. So it took really quite a while. So 6 months, 8 months before a buyer would make an offer. And it was then the Ketchum family.
Now, didn't the Bethlehem Steel CEO live there for a while?
No. I think there's a little bit of mystery around it. It was named the Harrison House because Beverly Thorne didn't have it easy in his professional life. So building with steel, having it exposed to view was not everyone's taste. And even the local construction and design industry was not really fond of him. So he was kind of an outlier in his practice and didn't have much support, except from Bethlehem Steel. So in gratitude for the support from Harrison Fuller, who was the West Coast CEO of Bethlehem Steel, he named it the Harrison House.
Okay. And then later on it went to a couple that worked for the airlines?
It was a couple, the Ketchums. He was a TWA pilot and she was a flight attendant. And they bought this house. We learned through the family. We had the chance to meet them not long ago, and we asked them, of course, about their family and how was it growing in the house. And they shared some fun stories. For example, Gary was based in, his airport base was New York. So he flew every week the New York-Paris route out of JFK's Aerosarinins terminal. So again, another super futuristic building for the time. When we learned that, we always wondered, what influence, if that had an influence in his decision, right? Because someone that sees every week, this is my place of work, and then comes to such a futuristic house, working in the industry that was new at the time, flying machines that were, being a pilot at the time was considered a profession that
very glamorous.
Very glamorous. So this story for us captured all the nostalgia of the 60s.
And I think he didn't only walk through the TWA terminal that just opened the year before. He walked through it in the uniform. So this also elevated his status. So walking
That's
through
like the Leonardo DiCaprio movie.
Very much, just with a better positive image than being kind of a semi-criminal.
Better ending.
It sounds like a plot from a movie. I mean, if you've got this couple working for TWA, living in the Modernist house, flying all around the world to these exotic locations. I mean, that was the iconic Modernist lifestyle.
That's what you would have thought. And as I mentioned, when we met the kids, we asked them about the parties that they probably had, and they said, no, our parties were strict and we didn't have that many parties. Yeah. So it's not exactly as one thinks.
Yeah. So therefore, they were able to keep the house in a very good shape. We don't have any kind of chipped bathtubs like the Frank Sinatra house.
Okay.
So I think it's a very good shape.
No one threw any bottles at anybody else.
I can tell you that the house was in immaculate state when we bought it. It was move-in ready, and really the changes that we have done have been only for improving energy performance, but even the cabinets in the kitchen are the same ones that they replaced because even the original stickers from St. Charles cabinets are inside. So you cannot remodel a kitchen like that and throw away the cabinets, right? We had to keep them, and it was a fun experience.
Now, you have made a journey of looking at other Thorne houses. Have you also started the route of looking at other case study houses? Because that's a small club of owners around the country.
Yes. So we must actually say the case study house 26 was the first case study house that we visited. Because when you go to Los Angeles, where all the other case study houses are, there are so many things to see. And even if I say we had architecture-related tours to Los Angeles, it's really difficult to get into the Stahl house or get into the Eames house. Of course, now, since then, we have been trying to really spend more time in Los Angeles and visit those houses. And by now, we have been to 4 case study houses, I would say.
So which ones? Do you remember which ones?
Yeah, of course, the 8 and 22.
Okay.
We drove by 21, huh?
I don't know if driving in front of them counts as a visit, but yes.
No, I think kind of the ones that are open for anyone who wants to visit. Of course, the number 8, the Eames house is open for visits, the Stahl house number 22. And these are the ones that are open, as well as, of course, our case study house 26, if you're in the Bay Area and would like to visit. And then we drove by a couple of houses, like 21 by Pierre Koenig. Mm-hmm. We noticed it was just under reconstruction again. We stayed in the semi-built number 13, which is in Pasadena, which has a longer story. It was not built, but I think a very similar design by Richard Neutra was built.
Okay.
So I think this can be called number 13.
Yes. The naming system varies a lot on some of these. There's an A or a B or...
Yes, and I think they were not built in the same chronological or numerical order.
Some came before the others.
Construction is difficult, so I think kind of they had challenges to build them. So because they had to find lots, financing, and builders. So I think therefore, as they were published in the magazine, it was not the same sequence how they were built and then kind of made open to the public.
Well, let's go back to the magazine. What was the genesis of all this with the Case Study House program?
Yeah, so the Arts and Architecture magazine was the brainchild of John Intensa. So he had this Los Angeles-based magazine, Arts and Architecture, that he bought a few years before, and he reprogrammed it to focus more on modern architecture, as well as a little bit of painting, literature, art, and music. But focus was really architecture. And then in 1945, just before the war came to an end, he issued in the January issue this call for the House of the Future, to really see how families after the war should live, because then the restrictions on wartime materials, like all the metals and plywood, etc., came to an end, while at the same time there was a lot of demand for housing. General population boom, people were moving to California, veterans coming from home. So a lot of people wanted to influence how the modern families should live, and that's why he called architects to submit designs, how these modern families should live, and was publishing them to promote these ideas, and of course then building them, showing them to the public to influence it.
It was a hugely popular experiment on the part of the magazine. It really catapulted the magazine to be in the avant-garde of the whole architecture media industry at the time.
Yeah, it had a very small distribution, but was highly influential. So all the West and East Coast offices really read it, or it even kind of found international acclaim. So like some of the houses were, of course, then published internationally. But it was highly influential. So I think it's California's biggest contribution to architecture. Like Esther McCoy, who was prolifically writing about California architects and their architecture, elevated the status of California's architecture perception, because up to that point, people really thought, oh, Los Angeles, this is where the people make the movies and build Spanish colonial. So it really changed the story of history in architecture in California.
I know that when case study houses came back into the public eye in really the mid-90s, several books came out about them, and your house is featured in those books.
It should. It's one of them.
Yeah.
Number 26.
I think the interest started in 1989 with the LA Mocha show. Of course, through the end of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, this type of architecture was not attractive. At least the people lost interest in it. But it was a show in LA Mocha in 1989 where they had actually two renderings, was it? Or two
Replicas.
Two replicas.
The Stahl house was one.
Yeah. Number 4?
number 4 by Rapson, this unbuilt one.
The Rapson. Greenbelt, was it the Greenbelt?
The Greenbelt one that they just put at the entrance, so really how you enter the show, you entered the house. So they really made a very good
And then it was
exhibition.
in 2000 really with the Taschen books that the house became more popular, and now
Every good modernist has a case study house book on their living room table or their bookshelf somewhere. It's a must-have, right?
Yeah. There are
Yes.
several editions.
You
And
got
when we
all of them, I'm
visited-
sure.
Yes, and I think there is even an XXL format available. There are several versions, the thinner ones and then the big portfolio ones. And there's a very extra big portfolio ones, and we were really shocked when our friends at Case Study House 13 saw it, and I thought, this feels bigger than ours that we have. What is wrong with ours? And then we saw it was out of print, but I think if you search long enough, you can find some additional copies.
We had on the show Elizabeth A.T. Smith, who wrote one of those.
Yeah.
Have you met her?
No, we have not met her.
Okay, you should meet her.
But I think she's extremely influential for kind of the revival. She authored the show at the LA MoCA in '89, and of course was authoring many of the books. We would love to meet her.
Well, we'll see if we can arrange that. What are your challenges looking forward for the house? Is it going to need any specific kind of work in the next 5 or so years?
we always have a lot of projects, but as I said, the house is in good shape, so thankfully we don't have to do anything major. Of course, improvements, because I mean, these are are old houses from the 60s that need maintenance. The house is an almost 1 acre lot, and although we have spent a lot of time working inside the house, I think that probably all the landscape needs some attention now.
So with Thorne's houses, what tends to need the work first? Is it the roof? Is it some of the supporting structures? I mean, what tends to be on the maintenance list for a Thorne house made out of steel?
I would say that in our house, perhaps the thing is that he used wood in certain parts that are exposed to water. So really, it's minor repairs. But I think after 60 years, that's normal. The steel is in perfect shape. The house and the sliding doors are, most of them, I would say 95% of them, are probably original and the original glass.
Oh, that's great. You're very fortunate, because
some
of the times those sliding doors do go.
Yeah. No, I think
they're not the most efficient, I must say.
No, I think we have a very different, I mean, we take good care of the house. A lot of people just kind of maintain the exterior and then remodel it on the inside a lot. But we really see that all the different parts and pieces contribute to the special character of the house. So the light fixtures, which are all original, as well as kind of the sliding doors that still have the little sticker from the manufacturer showing the stagecoach on the label. And it really shows how futuristic this house at this was, kind of just these kind of full-width, full-height glass sliders. So we try to keep as much as possible. But there's always something that needs to be repaired. Roofs in California don't hold up forever. So you redo them every year. And I'm sure over the next 10 years, this might be necessary for us. But overall, I think they're well built. They're holding up extremely well. And we have good climate. So building with steel is not good for all the different climates. So in California, if you're not directly on the coast, the corrosion is manageable. So I think we did a couple of fixes where it started to corrode more than we wanted to.
Yes.
But this has been addressed now.
Now, so in addition to having the house being designed by Beverly Thorne, famous architect, you also had a very famous landscape architect working on the house, Garrett Ekbo.
That is correct. They partnered with Garrett Ekbo for the landscape design. They started planting for the open house, but it was not fully realized. After then the Ketchums moved in, they continued to plant some more, inspired by it, but it was never fully completed. And of course, landscape designs don't have a lifespan like architecture. So landscape does change. So I think some of the trees are very mature now and have a substantial size, which is great. But I think kind of certain trees don't hold up so well. And of course, the entire neighborhood looks now very, very different 60 years later. As
we all do in 60 years on. And you all joined our friends at the Iconic Houses Network a couple of years ago, which is a great organization.
Yeah. No, it happened actually that Natasha Drabo visited the house in 2010.
Okay.
Still when René Ketchum was living in the house. So she was familiar with it, and they approached us if we want to be part of their network. And it's a great organization. And it was good that they had already visited the house before.
Does your house have a website people can visit?
It does, casestudyhouse.com.
Casestudyhouse.com. Very nice.
Easy one.
Easy one, yeah.
And available when we bought the house.
we have to say we couldn't get casestudyhouse26.com. It was taken.
Really? But the generic one wasn't.
That's correct.
So we had to go to the next best option, which is casestudyhouse.com.
Casestudyhouse.com. Okay, everybody start Googling. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having us here.
That was George with the owners of Case Study House 26. Returning podcast guest Josh Gorrell is an artist, director, writer, architectural designer, preservationist, and the luckiest guy in Los Angeles. Through some combination of guts, charisma, and detailed knowledge of modernism, he charms his way into iconic modernist houses where he lives for free. In exchange, he becomes the house preservationist, tour guide, maintenance engineer, and publicist. Josh is the creator of the films Introducing Rudolph Michael Schindler, Architect, and Simply Complex, The Lovell Health House by Richard Neutra. And now here's our poolside conversation with lucky LA modernist Josh Gorrell, joined by past podcast guest and Josh's personal driver, Elwood whisperer Barton Jonke.
Josh, thanks for coming back on the show. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, George. It's always a pleasure to be here, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Now, you've changed addresses since we spoke with you last, and I understand that your rent has not increased. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so after living in the Lovell Health House for just a little over 2 years, I had departed down to the beach to get into some surfing again, and then about 2 months ago, got a call from Raymond Neutra and asked me if I'd like to live in the Reunion House. And I was like, is this my life? Is this happening? And I said, of course, I'm there as soon as possible. And yeah, so now I'm living at the Dion Neutra, Richard Neutra Reunion House in Silver Lake, and I'm loving it. My jam for Neutra has always been Lovell House to about 1943, Nesbitt, like anything past that's just way too new for me.
Yeah. You're a classicist.
Yeah, I'm a classicist. It's just like, whatever, 45. I mean, even the Kaufman House out here, I'm like,
modernist
whatever.
classicist.
Yeah. I go to the Miller House. I don't care about the Kaufman House. But now that I'm there and I'm in this colony and all these beautiful Neutras down there, I'm starting to find a real appreciation for that particular decade, and the detailing is just so sharp and so amazing. And you could just see how the practice had just gotten so good with just the tightest details. So I'm starting to now kind of leave that past behind and start to move into the newer, old modern houses. But yeah, it's...
Well, I think once people understand your history, they just really envy your life because you spent all this time in the Lovell Health House, one of the seminal houses in Southern California.
Yeah, how long were
by
you there?
Neutra.
Yeah, just a little over 2 years.
Just a little over 2 years.
Yeah.
And you didn't own the house, you didn't rent the house, but what was your role in this house that you stayed in for free?
Ironically, actually, everybody always told me they were coming to my house when they would come to visit. I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is definitely not my house, But my role was everything. I mean, I love, the Topper family was so nice to me to allow me to have that opportunity. And they were also so nice to allow me to just basically do as I wanted for the most part. I was like, I have to rearrange the furniture. I've got to take all of your personal belongings and get them out of the house so I can stage it properly. But I joke. Yeah, my role was, I was window washer, I cleaned every one of those windows that I could possibly reach with the longest extension window washer.
Imaginable, yes.
Yeah.
Did you mow the lawn?
I didn't mow the lawn because there never was a lawn.
Yeah.
It was a nice dirt pile right there. We did plant it a little bit. But we did tours.
You did lots of tours.
Lots of tours. Lots of people
came through that house.
I was
So
shocked.
You were the tour manager, the maintenance manager.
The maintenance manager. Right? I was marketing. I was management. Yeah, it was the tour. Actually, the last tour, we'd have walk-up Saturdays. So most of it was like you had to book a tour. But Saturdays, on the hour, every hour for 4 hours, anybody could show up. And I never thought for a second, that would be a problem. But then we started getting so popular right before the pandemic. The last Saturday tour almost gave me a heart attack because it was like 20 people, 30 people. And I'm just like, oh, please not have another 10 people get out of a car because this is like I don't even know how to deal with this.
What was a typical group size before that point? Or what was your ideal?
A typical on a Saturday at any moment could be, biggest one would be about 15 to 20 people. I would be like, well, this is a good showing. But on average, it was about 6 to 9 people or so that would come, every hour. But people from all over the world, obviously. There wasn't a day, I don't think, that someone wasn't sitting on the street taking a picture. I had to always, make sure that I was in my underwear and not naked when I got out of bed, because you never knew if there was somebody in my garage trespassing and looking at me in my bedroom. So that was really weird. I was literally living in a glass box that everybody just
not throwing stones. I hope.
Yeah, not throwing stones. And it's also really remarkable how possessive people were about being able to look at the house. It's like, yeah, I'm on your driveway or I'm in your yard, but yeah, I'm here to see the house. What are you going to say about it? I'm like, not much. I'm kind of one of you. So congratulations, but get the heck out of here.
You made it.
Yeah. People used to come in and say, oh, can I take pictures? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I was like, if I didn't let you take pictures, I wouldn't allow you in here. I always tell people, if you don't want Josh Garrell to take pictures of your house, don't let me in it.
Yeah.
Even if you tell me don't take pictures, I'll probably take some pictures. I got to confess.
Now, you were there at the same time that Betty was still alive, for a while, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about her.
She was a wonderful woman. She really was. And I had known her for a number of years, actually. Actually, fun fact, my first tour that I gave at the house was to Ewan McGregor, Christopher Plummer, and Michael Mills for the movie Beginners, because they had asked me to be the site rep. So that's where my relationship with them had started. Betty just, she really enjoyed, I think she enjoyed having another person in the house, and she definitely enjoyed me cleaning her windows. In fact, she actually got wheeled up to it and would watch me as the squeegee was hitting the window and going like this.
Did she tell you missed a spot?
I think she did, actually, because she did have a great sense of humor.
She's just trying to help.
Yeah, she's just trying to help. I mean, she's a wonderful woman. And, she allowed us to actually open up the house while she was still alive, and she really got a kick of seeing all these people come through.
Yeah, you did a great event for us one year.
That's right. And I really just was so happy that they allowed that, because I love people coming into these houses and seeing them not in a book. It really makes a difference. And that house, I don't think anybody thought in a million years that they were going to have access like that, and now it's privately owned by very wealthy people, and who knows if that'll ever happen again, to the extent that just the general public gets to come in. It'll probably be people like Jay-Z and Madonna, that get to see it,
Famous couple.
Yeah, famous people. Yeah, Jay-Z and Madonna are a very famous unknown couple.
No one knows this yet.
Nobody knows. This is breaking news right here. Funny about the fame thing, though, so Brad Pitt came through.
Of course. Because that's what he would do.
That's what they do, right?
Yeah.
So the pandemic dropped on March 13th and the world shut down. But there was one person that still needed to come through to see the house 3 days later, and it was Brad Pitt. Well, I didn't know that. They just said it was an A-lister. They can't tell you until he literally is getting out of his car. And I was like, wow. And he came through. At first, I just stayed in my room. I didn't want to enter, and then the realtors were like, hey, Josh, you want to come down and tell Brad some things? And I was like, no, I'm reading, but, that's fine.
I'm doing my hair.
Yeah, I've got things going on. This isn't my gig. It's yours.
Was he by himself?
Yeah, he was by himself.
No entourage?
No entourage. Just really, and by the way, just an extremely nice guy. He's got the world, and he's nice. It's like...
There are a few of those.
God, this guy's amazing. And he was like a little kid just going through that, just taking pictures, just jaw dropped, never came back up to meet his top teeth again until he left and drove down the road.
He's quite the modernist fan, isn't he, George?
But he doesn't own any. I mean, all these years, he's been buying French villas and Italianate places, and I've never heard of him buying an actual modernist house, but he seems to visit a lot of them.
I think he was gearing up to do that on this day. We were sitting in the master bedroom, and at this point it was just him and I going through the house, and we were just geeking out like two kids in a candy store. And he turned around and he said, what's your favorite house, in Los Angeles? And I said, well, it's probably not one that a lot of people would think, but Schindler's King's Road. And before I could even finish that, he's like, that's my favorite house. Yeah. So we had a moment there.
Yeah.
And then he when he was getting ready to leave, it was almost like he didn't want to leave. You could see his shoulder.
Not.
He was like, okay. And then he was just like, okay, realtors, let's walk to the car. What do we got to do here? So I shook his hand, and I thought to myself, We're in a global pandemic and nobody knows what's going on here. This is how I'm going to die. Because I'm shaking Brad. I'm like, he's going to have the best care in the world, life support, lung breathing equipment. I am going to be dead. And
But you'll have shaken Brad Pitt's hand.
It's a good story
what
for
a way
heaven.
to go.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, months later, in my loneliness without a girlfriend at the time in the pandemic, and, I thought to myself, who's the last person I humanly touched skin on skin? And it was Brad Pitt. So never in a million years would I think that I was going to be living at the Level Health House. And definitely in a trillion years, I did not think that we'd be in a pandemic and Brad Pitt would have been the last person I humanly touched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so surreal.
So what you're hearing, folks, is that in addition to being the tour manager and the maintenance manager and the general concierge of the house, Josh was very involved in the sale of the house and showing it for quite a period of time. Yeah. Tell us about that process.
It was wonderful. I mean, the first people that were involved with the sale of that house were, I would say they were very smart to allow me to give tours and to actually talk to the people coming through. But of course, the people that sold it, Crosby, Doe & Associates, my friend Alana Gaffney, who really is one of my good friends now and fostered a relationship. And at the time when the Toppers were deciding that they wanted to change course and get off of this auction thing with the people that were representing it, they had asked me, who do you think? And I just, hands down, I was like, just Crosby, Doe. Just go with the man. He's the man.
The Yoda of modernism.
The Yoda of modernism. He started it all. He's the man. I was like, if he was on a life support machine and couldn't talk, it doesn't matter.
He'd still sell your house.
Go with him. Yeah. And so they did. They did that. And of course, that was the right choice. And it was great to share that moment with such an icon of people that sold these houses. And Crosby wasn't so giving and letting me give tours and talk to people because, of course, he's Crosby Doe and he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like, all right, I'll let him do it, But he found the right people, and they are the right people. The Worths are amazing. I actually got to meet them when they first came and toured the house, a couple of months after I was there, and I was like, these people. These would be great owners.
So did you have any kind of spidey sense, Josh, about the people that would visit who were going to tear the house down versus preserve the house?
I had a little short that I had written that I titled Health House Hostage. And it was this falling down Michael Douglas kind of moment in Modernism where in the movie idea, the treatment, a billionaire comes in. He goes to an astrologer one night, drunk with his, 30-year younger girlfriend in Orange County, of course, because of course he'd be from Orange County. And he was told that he needed to buy this house at this property. She dropped her finger on a map, almost like a
Ouija board?
Like Nathan in The Jerk, Steve Martin, where he opens up the phone book and he's sees his name and he's like, I'm somebody. And then right at the same time, some random guy just puts his finger, he's like, you're dead, Nathan, So she puts the finger on the map and tells him he's got to buy the property. He goes up there and he's like, okay, I'm going to buy the property, but this house has to go. So in the treatment, I find out, and I'm like, no, it doesn't. So I basically wire the place top to bottom with C4 and take it hostage.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you'd have to destroy it in order to save it.
Well, that was the thing, because he was going to destroy it. So I was like, well, and I was basically the idea was to ruin his California remodel.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's going to have to be all new construction. So the permitting would have been a lot more difficult.
This is all fiction, folks.
All fiction.
Yes.
And ironically...
The mind of Josh Garrell.
Really.
But what was the reality of it? How did you sort of suss out the people that visited or were prospective buyers? Did they give any red flags when they were coming through?
Yes, actually. There was one individual that came through, an artist, a fine artist, and he was kind of just looking around in the entryway at the high ceilings, and he said, where's all the light in this house? And
in the Level Health House.
In the Level Health House. Oh, by the way, that was before one of the realtors that was at the time showing the house came to me and said, Josh, is the space behind the blue bathroom in the master bedroom, is that the same size? And I said, oh, yeah, why? And she just walked away and she goes, yeah, you can make a walk-in closet in there. And I was just like, we said, excuse me? And then he asked about lighting, and I already could see he was about to put track lighting for all of his, great work and stuff like that. And that was the only guy where I was like, if I see that guy come back, I'm going to tackle him and make him never want to come back here ever again.
Yeah. Put some C4 in his Mercedes.
Yeah.
Yeah, uh-huh.
But everybody else was pretty genuine. I met more billionaires than I thought I would ever meet in my life,
They're just like you and me.
Yeah, they're just normal people. They just got a little more money in the bank, But yeah, really wonderful people.
I would think this would not be a typical house for a billionaire because it is so special and there's so much time they're going to have to spend working on it to bring it back to life.
Yeah. Actually, going back to the Brad Pitt moment, he was asking me, because I've done some restoration work myself, and he was like, how long do you think it'll take? He's like, do you think you can get it, like, could you do this in 2 years? And I was like, would you need it done in 2 years? He's like, I'd like to get it done in 2 years. I was like, well, for you, Brad, I'll start doing speed and add an extra 8, make an 8-day week and 25-hour-a-day work week, I guess. And
that global supply chain crisis is coming up? I'll cancel.
No problem.
We'll have all the building materials you need tomorrow.
Nothing is going to impede the progress of a 2-year restoration. That's going to be a major piece of work,
So now you're in the Reunion House.
Yes.
In Silver Lake, which was the former home of Dion Neutra, passed away a couple of years ago, the son of Richard Neutra. Yeah. And his other son, Raymond, runs the Neutra Institute, which has control of the house now. Mm-hmm. What's the future for the house? What do they want to do with it?
They very much want to keep it into kind of a public space to allow schools. Right now, they're actually working with the USC class right away for materials and methods, and I love that. I love that they're doing that. They also want to open it up to traveling scholars to stay there, and possibly some exchange students along the way at some point. So they want to keep it a public space and kind of a museum house, is my understanding. Right now, we're kind of keeping it under wraps while we get everything worked out. There's a little bit of restoration work that needs to be done. I've got a year there for sure. And then I guess we'll reassess what I've done or who I am at that point and whether I fit into the program going forward.
Well, I would think there'd be some waiting list of people, wanting to get Josh to come manage their houses.
That's the Josh Garrell dream continued.
Yes.
It's pretty surreal. It is like so surreal. I'm literally living on Neutra Place in a Neutra that's actually a Neutra's Neutra.
Yeah. It's a quad Neutra.
Yeah, you don't get more Neutra than that. It's pretty special. I'm very honored.
Describe the neighborhood for us, Silver Lake, which is Neutra Central.
Oh,
really.
It's a cesspool. It's crime and prostitute. It's my kind of town. But no, I love Silver Lake. I love the street I'm on. Those amazing Neutras in the colony right there. I'm doing some video work for the Institute right now on the apartment that's over the office. So I take the walk down the street and go to the office building.
This is the VDL Institute around the corner.
Not the VDL, but the office.
The office.
The Glendale office building has an apartment above it and below that's occupied. And I'm like doing the Neutra walk, like to the office building. And then I'm walking back to, because Richard Neutra did live in the Reunion House for 2 years after the fire. Mm-hmm. And so it's just surreal. It's just absolutely surreal. And I have a real peace about living in Los Angeles. I've tried to leave LA at least 7 times, and she just will not let me break up with her. So I'm just like, all right, that's it. I'm here to stay. Obviously, I can't leave. I get it. But, where do you live in LA? I've lived in so many different places, as everybody knows. And I love Silver Lake. I would like to really stay in Silver Lake for my tenure on this earth going forward, if I can.
Well, you've got a lot of choices there, right?
It's such a great...
There's what, like 60, 80 iconic mid-century houses, plus all the newer ones that have gone up since then.
And I think they're going to actually they're going to open up the reservoir, I've heard.
What does that mean?
That means they're going to take that wonderful, beautiful chain link fence down that gives you such a great view of the water.
Yeah.
So apparently they had to just find another reservoir to kind of take over what that was doing, and they did that. And so now, there's plans to take down the fence, have some paddle boats out there so you can strum a little ukulele with your girlfriend and sing songs. And,
now, why would they have fenced it up to begin with?
Do you see humans on this planet, George?
Well, yeah, but
Do you know what they're capable of? I mean, how many bodies would be floating in that lake? Because they didn't put rocks in the pants, Yeah, who knows? Or maybe some guy, tethering a hose down there to water his lawn every day,
That's probably the likely crime.
That's probably the likely crime, yeah.
But it's great to know that they're going to open it back up.
That's what I've been told. So, I think that, then it just is going to become a dream. I mean, if they put in, little restaurants and stuff around there, maybe a dock that goes out over the water with like a boardwalk kind of Redondo Beach thing going.
But aren't you worried that some Silver Lake preservationist is going to say, you took down the chain link fence? That's part of the original provenance of the place.
I am sure
you
that's
put it
going
back
to
up.
happen. I am sure that's going. And you know me. I mean, I would have gladly erased the Gregory Ain office at the Health House. I know that's blasphemy. But I would have done it. So I don't have any problem taking down the chain link fence.
Yeah.
Now, this is an inside baseball question, but I think you probably know this answer. So what happened to that sign in front of the VDL house that Dion Neutra was railing about for years?
Oh, the crosswalk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wait. By the way, this is my friend Barton Janke, who has been sitting here quiet this whole time.
One of our past guests.
Yep.
And a lot of great work that this man has done.
But we have to pay him by the word, apparently.
And he's got more charisma. He's got more charisma in his little pinky than all three of us.
It's not about me. It's not about me.
But anyway,
what about
it's
this?
about you and the sweater factory at the Level Health House has had to move. He's been displaced. All the children, they've all gone somewhere else. We're hoping that he can continue the sweater company.
One step ahead
I do
of
it
the
for
law.
the children.
Yeah.
I do it for the children. But Barton, please elaborate.
It's sustainable. Yeah. So.
What sign is this? Or was this?
Well, there's always been a sign sort of right there, and it's kind of I think it's a crosswalk. Was it a crosswalk sign, or it's like some funny, like a half a block away?
Yeah, it was blocking the view of the
pretty
house.
much.
That's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, Dion had a lot
And
of
it takes you
obsession.
to like a meadow across the street, basically, right? It's
Right,
like
yes.
Sheep's Meadow kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you can go out from the house and actually go in. Your kids can play in the grass and everything.
So
It's
the
quite
hell
beautiful.
with pedestrian safety.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't see the house.
That's right.
But Dion was a great guy and very brilliant, but when he would rail against something, he would send an email to somebody, and he would CC everyone he ever knew on his list.
Oh.
So an email would go out to 500 people about anything.
That being said, when I moved into the Health House, somebody had a suspicion about what was going on over there and had sent Dion a private email, who is this Josh Gorrell guy, literally. And I know what they said because Dion copied me and this person.
Your
And
whole
just
conversation.
aired the dirty laundry that this human being had grievances towards me. I mean, this
And
person.
What was the basis of her grievances? Or can you
It
say?
was, she thought that there was some elderly abuse going on.
All that window washing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There was a preservationist, quote unquote, because she had listened to Francis Anderton on KCRW.
Uh-huh.
And who is this guy? Why is he there? I don't know it, And so, yeah, of course, Dion just, copied me on it. And I was just like, wow. And she very much was like, oh my God, what just happened?
You just shoot a spitball and you get a cannon back.
Yeah. Well, Dion was such a fascinating man. We did his last interview here before he passed away in Modernism Week a couple of years ago. And, Dion, as many children of famous architects do, was overshadowed by his dad his whole life.
Tough
So
one.
we spent the last interview with no mention of Richard Neutra.
It's very sweet.
And we just talked
Of you.
about Dion Neutra projects, particularly his Huntington Library,
Which
he was
I used
so
to go
proud
to.
of.
I loved that
So
library
proud
as
of.
a kid.
One of the most, spectacular little libraries, and
Yeah.
they've kept it mostly intact.
Yeah, like you said, overshadowed. I mean, it's the children of these great people, right? It's just incredible to try to live up to that standard. But Dion was pure of heart, and yeah, if he set his sights on something, he was relentless. As far as that sign and the crosswalk and the cyclorama, saving the Gettysburg,
that's right.
the Cronish House over there. Actually, it was kind of funny because when we were trying to save the Cronish house in Beverly Hills, which has no historical, right? Because rich people, they're just like, let them tear it down and do whatever they want. Are you kidding me? We're not going to do any historical things here. We got permission from the owners and the realtors at the time to come over and at least document the house and take pictures. And Dion's sitting there, and there's somebody that might want to buy it, and he's going, oh, this is going to cost $12 million to restore. And we're just like, shh. These are the right people. Like, what are you talking about? Don't scare them. $12 million, So he was always thinking big and always wanting to do the right thing, bless him.
Well, also because Dion was so prolific in his emails and who he knew, the word would often get out to the right people. And in that case, just so happened that a Greek shipping tycoon would come in and take it over, which is what you need in those situations, right?
Yes. Believe it or not, I haven't been over there to see it since. It's like, who are these people? I'm Josh, you got to let me in.
Yeah.
But, those big gated properties in that area, they're not so giving like that. So I have not seen it yet since its restoration. I would love to, but it was a beautiful house, though.
Well, Josh, as you plan your future, how can people reach you when they need you to come over and live in their modernist house, take care of things?
Well, there's a dive bar in Hollywood with my phone number on the wall, but unless you're not going to that, you can reach me. I've got an Instagram profile at Josh Gorrell Earth, because that's currently where I'm at. And
Good to know.
Yeah, and I'm setting up my will so that when I die, it'll be like Josh Gorrell Hell.
Oh, okay.
So that's
we're looking for here is an email address.
I'm not planning on going upstairs.
Yeah.
My email address is bydesignjosh, all one word, bydesignjosh@gmail.com. Feel free to reach out. I'm always here to help anybody with restoration questions regarding Richard Neutra, which I know very well, and any other houses, because I've been in a lot of them.
I don't mean to jump in, but, today's Josh's birthday, and Josh is very kindly always kind of helps me out. He's a super loyal guy. He's probably one of the only people who, kind of lives under the radar in a healthy way and knows what he knows and doesn't put that on everybody, because we have a lot of quote-unquote experts out there. But he's an actual true expert who doesn't remind us the whole time that he is an expert. So he's a stand-up solid guy. I mean, I haven't met someone that I find that loyal to have around and you can have around besides Josh. I mean, this is the real deal. He's
happy birthday, Josh.
Been around.
Thank you.
Yeah, he deserves it. He called me and said, I got to get to Palm Springs. I said, let's hop in the rod and go.
Yeah.
And we hopped in the car this morning and we ripped it out here and had a blast and have caught up, and that's kind of
I think he got it up to 130 miles an hour, actually.
Wow, that's not bad.
Yeah. Well, it was important to get out here, It's
It
thanks
is.
to
Now,
Bart.
Josh, if you can fix things, and obviously you can you get a reliable train service to come from L.A. to Palm Springs?
Oh, don't
One
get
that
me
doesn't
started.
land at 2:30 in the morning in this isolated concrete hut 6 miles outside of town?
George, I got to tell you, having lived in Switzerland with that dynamic public transportation system of trains, trams, and buses that can get you to the farthest reaches of the Alps, I don't know what happened to California. It's like we just want people to be punished sitting in traffic all the time. It just blows my mind. There's so many things that could be solved through a more robust rail system and public transportation system. I think that these solutions can be better serviced outside of Los Angeles County because it's just, you got a cheaper build, a cheaper area. Everything involved will be much more economical. And with a good train system, you can get on a train and come to LA and work.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like in Switzerland, you can live in a little village outside of town. 30 minutes, you're in the Civic Center at your job every day, and it's enjoyable, and you're not stuck in traffic. And
Well, I would think Richard Branson or maybe even Brad Pitt could get on this project.
I think Brad Pitt can save
Next
the world.
time you guys, hang out together, mention this, please.
I
think Mr. Musk is already working on the tunnel.
The tunnel?
We're being drilled.
Yeah, but that tunnel only goes from Brentwood to Beverly Hills.
That's, who knows? But yeah, I think it's happening.
I mean,
we're in the
it's so
third
not
city
fair.
anyway.
It's
We've
so
doubled
not
on
fair.
ourselves.
Did he ever build the one to the airport?
No, not
No.
finished, but they are continuously digging. Oh yeah, it's a big bore going on, and it's going to happen. I mean, we're working on pads charge your cars on the highway, built into the highways now, so when you're charged the whole time you're driving your car. I mean, that's where we're going.
Well, that's what 5G does, right? It charges your phone and gives you COVID.
Yeah. Then it's going to be very positive.
Will it let me solve Wordle faster?
Well, too much doubling up of letters now, George. Too much doubling up.
That's always the challenge.
Repeat letters are...
kill you.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm over.
Thank you both for coming over. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
That was George talking with Josh Gorrell and Barton Jonke. Once again, we're bringing you an excerpt from Anthony Poon's new book, Death by Design at Alcatraz. Yes, it's fiction, but it's also a great read about architects being murdered while competing for a huge museum of art on Alcatraz Island.
Murder.
Here's the author reading from his new novel, Death by Design at Alcatraz.
Chapter 30. Tick-tock goes the clock. Time ticks by. The clock's hour hand appears to move as fast as the minute hand, and minutes pass like seconds. The architects decline their dinner break, their last supper, waving off the distractions of the more highbrow banter and posturing. No to textuality, mimesis, and Derrida. No to wood sorrel and sheep milk's yogurt. Nearing the conclusion of this architecture competition, the remaining 4 studios are a mess, a war zone of design disputes and battle scars, even lost limbs of an incomplete mock-up of metal, acrylic, and cardboard. Unsuccessful drawings litter the floor. Aborted model parts are tossed across the gallery, and pages violently torn from magazines are haphazardly stapled to the walls, layers upon senseless layers. Pencils and pens of all sizes become tripping hazards, like a banana peel awaiting its clown. Computer software crashes due to immense file sizes, and printers jam and run out of toner, as they always do when approaching a deadline. As the principal architects rehearse their presentations, sometimes the choreographed performance is that of a well-oiled professional. Other times, it resembles a snake oil peddler from a Western movie. Attending the final hour is a rare ticket in town, a spectacular recital of showmanship and disaster. As model glue is drying with the accelerant zip kicker, as slides are being reshuffled in PowerPoint for the umpteenth time, onlookers observe the antics and appreciate the determination of each architect, and the insanity too. Chatter and rants between designers accompany the humming scanners, while plotter printheads rattle a helpless noise. Basswood is being trimmed and fitted for the models, while tired feet pace on discarded scraps gathering high on the floor. Despite the tragedy at the lighthouse, this fire hazard of discarded paper and Kindle is of no concern to anyone in this home stretch. The competitors finally see, the definitive period at the end of a 4-day-long sentence.
That was architect Anthony Poon reading an excerpt from his new novel, Death by Design at Alcatraz.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. And by Modernist realtor Angela Roll. Want to go with us to Modernism Week in 2023 and stay with us at the U.S. Modernist compound? Email me at george@usmodernist.org. Okay, Tom, wrap us up.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 15,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Rogue archivist Carrie Cesarino outdid herself. She researched all the guests for our Modernism Week interviews. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another sitting by the pool, looking at the mountains, drinking martinis, looking for another beer, talking architecture edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.